Humanists Take on the World, episode 19, Thanksgiving and Mastodon. Welcome to the episode of welcome to the episode of Humanists Take on the World. I'm Dustin, and joining me is Lauren.
Oh. You're not recording though, are you?
I had your mic up.
Hello, everyone.
All right, so happy Thanksgiving!
Yay!
At least to all the Americans listening, and for everybody else, you know, it's American Thanksgiving.
Yep.
All right, so Lauren, what are you thankful for?
I am thankful for chocolate. I am thankful for sugar-free, keto-friendly ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
Because that keeps me sane.
Yep.
I'm thankful for you and our listeners.
Yep. And I'm thankful for dropping 25 pounds this year. You get my blood pressure back under control.
Woohoo.
Keto diet. And just feeling way better about everything, and even handling the stress of, you know, my mom's cancer and Lauren's health issues and
whoop, whoop.
Work and all of that. And
yeah, because brain dysfunction is the spice of life. Gotta keep things interesting.
Oh, yeah. And, all right, let's go ahead and jump into the main topic. So, Thanksgiving. That's a holiday that the U.S. has had since 1863. It was proclaimed by Abraham Lincoln to try to help people have some kind of hope in the middle of the Civil War.
Yeah.
And
be thankful for what you've got. Thanks, Dad.
And
what a presidential dad thing to do.
And a big part of that was also that this was just a few years after a letter had been brought back to the United States.
Was it the letter X?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
This was, so the story of what's considered the first Thanksgiving, there is one eyewitness account. So the letter was written in December of 1621. So just a couple months after the harvest Thanksgiving celebration thing that they'd had. And then William Bradford, who was the governor of Plymouth Plantation in 1861, he wrote a little bit about it, but that was in a book more than 20 years later. So the original letter about it, that was actually captured by the British during the Revolutionary War and didn't come back to the U.S. until the 1850s.
Oh, wow. Oh, okay.
So then, should we start with what led to it, or start with the actual, that first Thanksgiving?
No, you should talk about the letter. Everybody's heard the story of Thanksgiving. What's this letter?
Well, it was basically just the eyewitness account of what was going on with the celebration.
Okay.
So basically, across 3 days between late September and mid-November of 1621, there were 3 days of celebrations. Present were basically all of the survivors of the Mayflower. So that would have included barely over 50 people on that side. 22 men, 4 married women, 25 children and teenagers. So
4 women?
Yeah, 4
Right.
adult women.
Okay.
Yeah. And because, more than half of the people who'd been on the Mayflower had died over that first year. And even worse, 78% of the adult women had died.
Yikes.
Which left only 4 who were still married.
Yeah.
Okay, so who did the cooking? Nobody would think it was just those 4 women.
No, that was everybody. Everybody cooks. Everybody pitches in at that point.
Absolutely.
Child labor. Kids.
Oh, yeah. When you've got, with nearly half of the, at least English people present being children and teenagers, then yeah, they would have. And on top of that, there were their allies, one of whom was King MacLeod, who was the sachem or leader of the Pennoaket Wampanoag tribe, who was the local leader who had befriended the English colonists. We will get into why he did that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But he showed up with at least 90 people.
Wow.
It is possible there were other tribal bands that also showed up. So there was at least 140 people present for these celebrations. And it would have been a combination of feasting and general frivolity.
Making more babies.
And military displays. And yeah. So basically envision like a lancing tournament from the Middle Ages, but a little bit later and with people who weren't nobility, except for, well, there was actually a king there. So yes, there were nobles, but not anything that Europeans would have recognized as nobles. So then while they were feasting, it is highly likely, but not documented, that they did eat turkey.
The turkey thing.
The main...
All right. I mean, yeah, maybe. Maybe not.
The main reason why it's likely is because at that time there was tons and tons and tons of wild turkey all around the land.
Yeah. They're prolific little birds.
Yeah.
Big birds.
And native to North America. So, yeah, the yeah, not little. Although the wild turkeys are quite a bit smaller than the domestic turkeys that we
naturally.
buy headless, frozen. Yeah. The main course was venison, where King MacLeod arrived with at least 5 deer, which, okay, if you're showing up for a party...
That's quite the haul, though.
Bringing 5 deer in, that sounds pretty good. The Native Americans also brought a bunch of their harvest, and the English settlers had their harvest, and they all shared, which was a mixing of Old World and New World foods. Not the earliest. You know, we're talking 1621. By that time, the Columbian Exchange had been going on for like 130 years. There had been a lot of mixing of foods. In fact, the Mayflower had turkeys on board.
Right.
That were had
turkeys, tomatoes, or whatever, potatoes. They were all and
the turkeys the Mayflower had were Mexican turkeys that were getting domesticated by the Aztecs, that were then taken over to Europe, where they got more domesticated, because domesticating livestock was a relatively new thing in the New World.
Subjugated.
Okay.
Turkeys are feisty.
But Europeans had way more experience with how to do selective breeding to get what you want out of livestock. And so the turkeys were more domesticated, and then there were some on board the Mayflower because, of course, and then they land in a place where they're surrounded by turkeys. I'm sure they were fighting turkeys to try to keep them out of their crops.
Yeah, anybody who has wild turkeys in their area know what a pain they can be. Deer too, actually. No wonder they slaughtered. Stop eating my roses.
So in addition to the venison and possibly turkey, they would have had fish and shellfish, which were both incredibly abundant. So probably a lot of cod and crab and lobster.
You know, all that trash fish.
Yeah. As well as the stuff the colonists grew in their gardens. Cabbage, carrots, cucumbers, leeks, lettuce, parsnips, and pumpkins. And a lot of native wild plants, including Jerusalem artichokes, garlic, cranberries, Concord grapes, walnuts, and chestnuts.
Yep, sounds pretty good.
You know what's not on that list? Potatoes.
Potatoes.
Or sweet potatoes.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you want to go really, really legit traditional, it would be venison and crab.
I'm okay with that.
With parsnips.
Parsnips and leeks.
And leeks and garlic and artichokes. Oh man, that would be pretty damn good.
So good. Right? Jerusalem artichokes are not artichokes, though.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
They should be called sunchokes, at least. Because they're not like the thistle food. They're more like tubers.
Okay. It is well established that to feed 140 some odd people, the 4 married women that were still alive were not doing all of that. The children and men were also definitely doing a lot of the cooking. I am quite certain that my ancestor who was present would have been helping with the cooking because he was an indentured servant at the time.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if your ancestor that was present would have also, because he was 17 or 18 by then. And
chances, I mean, who cares who did the cooking?
This article covers that point.
Covered that point. It was like, well, no, duh. But actually, 17, 18-year-old kid, no. He was off jousting or whatever. Literally the least likely to actually be helping with the meal.
So there is no information as to whether or not the Thanksgiving tradition continued in Plymouth Plantation. Just no records about it.
Probably not then.
Probably didn't. But harvest Thanksgiving celebrations did become a pretty standard thing throughout New England, likely having nothing to do with this.
Right. Harvest celebrations are almost universal in any kind of northern culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's the last hurrah before everything gets preserved and put away. So, yeah, you feast.
All right. So what brought them to this point? Everybody knows a version of what happened with the Mayflower. Yes, it was the Pilgrims. They weren't called Pilgrims then. That name didn't come around till the 1800s. And they were called that because they were the first ones to arrive in, well, not Virginia.
First religious.
And particularly the first religious Americans.
You don't call random people
religious
Pilgrims. They're
religious. The first white religious Europeans, or maybe the first Protestant.
There you go. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that covers it.
Yep. Because there was plenty of religious Europeans in Mexico at that time. Like tons. But they were all Catholic. And that was...
And they don't count.
That was no good. So the Browns, or separatists, they were generally at the time referred to as Browns. They were more...
Brown coats?
Yeah. Yeah.
Firefly reference.
They were more accurately, though, the separatist. These were Congregationalist. These were... we talked about this several months ago with the Congregationalist split from the Church of England that ended up becoming the Unitarians and Universalists, and eventually led to the American Humanist Association and a lot of the modern free thought and atheist movement. There was a schism happening within the congregation.
Schisms! Pew, pew, pew! You should have a sound bite for that.
Which was quite difficult for Congregationalists to have any kind of schism, because the main point of the Congregationalist movement was everybody was equals and every church was independent. Where the schism was happening was one group, the main group, thought that they should stay a part of the Church of England and try to reform the Church of England. The separatists were much more of the opinion of the Church of England is completely corrupt and they need to just do their own thing separate from it.
Yeah.
That did not go well with the English government.
You think?
Like, King James was all about the right kind of Christianity and people not wanting to be part of his church. He was not happy with, and they fled to the Netherlands.
This is the King James of King James Bible.
Yes.
King James? Okay.
So they flee to the Netherlands, where they spend 20 years hanging out. They reach the point where they are worried about their children marrying local Dutch people.
Freaky deaky Dutch.
And getting too liberalized, because they went to a very liberal country for tolerance. They did not want to be seduced by the country. So they made the plan to go to this uninhabited landmass that's full of people.
Right. Small detail there.
And so they did. They chartered a boat, 2 boats actually. They loaded up in the Netherlands, and they sailed down the canal and got into the ocean and went to England to pick up more people, by which point they needed investors to help pay. They also needed to get official documents allowing them to do this. And so they worked with the government and the London company, and they got official approval to go to Virginia, where Jamestown was already established. So they would be the second big group of colonists to arrive in Virginia to help bolster the single English colony that was in the New World. They secretly worked on 2 other plans. One was to try to settle the Hudson River area before the Dutch could.
Okay.
And
They had a beef with the Dutch, didn't they?
The backup plan, well, the investors really wanted them to get the Hudson.
Right. It was the adventurers and investors and trade companies that wanted in.
Yeah. And the backup option that had been identified was Cape Cod in modern-day Massachusetts. So they left, started sailing, and had maintenance issues, so they had to land again. They had to abandon one of the boats, the small boat. They had to leave at least 20 people behind because they didn't have room for everybody in England.
Okay.
By this time, there was quite a few people known as adventurers and their servants. The adventurers were rich Englishmen who had helped bankroll this whole thing. They all had indentured servants. My ancestor on the Mayflower was one of those indentured servants.
Yeah.
Edward Doty. They sailed. They got hit by a big storm. The ship started taking on water.
Immediately got fucked.
They used a giant steel screw to patch the hole in the main beam of the boat.
Nice.
That screw was probably going to be a cider press or a lift for building houses in the settlement.
Clever.
Yeah. They survived. They never went anywhere near Virginia. They did go to the mouth of the Hudson, where the Dutch West Indies Company told them to get the hell out of there.
Yep.
At that time, the Dutch had negotiated trade rights with the local tribes and no permanent settlement. But they had very carefully tried to maintain an area of kind of economic exclusive activity. And they did not want 100 English settlers messing that up.
Oh, yeah. They totally would have ruined everything. Bunch of tourists.
So they fell back to Plan B, and Plan B was the Cape Cod area, where they found the place that they would settle, which was Plymouth Plantation. Now, around Plymouth, in those early landings, because they showed up in very late fall, 1820, the weather was already terrible. Very late fall, 1620, it was already snowing. It was stormy. Most of the people didn't get off the boat. They made several expeditions onto land. A few people did, where they found a European house that had been abandoned.
Okay.
They found cast iron cooking pot still in the house.
Bonanza.
They found, not the first Europeans in the area by any means. They found numerous graves, which of course they dug up.
Yeah, gotta loot those bodies.
In one of the graves, they found a bunch of corn. They kept most of the corn for seeds to plant the next year. And they buried the rest back up, along with the human remains they found. Along further exploration, they eventually came across Plymouth, which was a completely abandoned settlement, complete with buildings.
European or native?
Native.
Okay.
And skeletons.
Yeah.
Still in some of the buildings.
Yeah. That's not ominous. They don't teach that in elementary school.
No. Plymouth was not a new town. It was a rebuilt town. What had been going on in this time period, the Wampanoag tribe knew the English very well because English fishing boats had been sailing off their waters for 100 years at that time. And not just sailing off their waters, but landing and trading and capturing slaves.
Yeah. They don't mention that in elementary school either.
Including Thomas Hunt was the most notorious of the English fishermen who'd gone through the area, where he abducted 20 people from Polloxet, which is the site that Plymouth was built on, and a grand total of about 70 people from that rather small area that he took back to Europe to sell as slaves.
Wow. What a dick.
One of those people was Squanto.
Oh, okay.
The elementary school
name I know, but never. I know the name, but I don't know why.
Squanto is a key figure in the first Thanksgiving story because he shows up and he's Campoenig, but knows English.
Oh.
And so he serves as the translator for everybody.
Okay. Yeah. Faintly ringing a bell there.
The sanitized elementary school version of that is he wanted to explore a new world, so he hitched a ride with a random boat and spent time in England and got to learn English and then went back home and got to serve as a translator. No, he was captured as a slave.
No. Oh, no.
He learned English as a slave. He managed to escape and somehow got back home.
Wow.
Where
he was not on the Mayflower himself. That was probably years before.
He probably hitched a ride on one of the fishing boats.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that was Thomas Hunt? Yeah, that's awful.
Yeah. Along with these English fishing boats, traveling up and down the area, interacting with the native population, they brought European diseases.
This is where we graduate from elementary school, usually up to about high school, so where you start learning about the smallpox blankets and stuff.
Now, this was before smallpox blankets. This was just casual contact. But there was a particular plague that went through what's now Massachusetts in probably 1617 that wiped out as much as 90% of some villages. Where Plymouth was established was one of those villages. 90% of the population was wiped out. As a whole, that year, between 1/3 and half of the native population of the area died.
Yeah, that's crazy.
3 years later, a group of white people show up. The political status quo between the tribes and tribal bands and groups was completely and utterly obliterated by disease. There were some chiefs who took advantage of that to try to conquer neighboring groups, and Massasoit was one of those kings who found himself disadvantaged by the effect that disease, most likely smallpox, had on his tribe. and he needed help to avoid being annihilated by, or at least conquered by, a neighbor. People with guns showed up. He wanted to become friends with them.
Yeah.
So he did what he could to ignore the fact that these were the hated English who brought nothing but disease and kidnapped their people to make slaves. He put all that aside to survive. They fought wars on the same side for several years against other tribes. They helped each other with food and crops and sharing seeds and food items and technology, mostly food, until a few more years go by and the colony has grown, and then they end up fighting each other. Because, of course.
Because, yeah, that was always going to be the inevitable.
So the story itself is heartwarming. The Thanksgiving story itself is a heartwarming tale of people from different cultures coming together. It's awesome. It's a wonderful story. When you look at the bigger picture around it, it's messy.
Well, yeah.
Super messy.
All of American history, all of human history is like that.
Yeah.
You have to acknowledge the messiness and that things weren't as clean and nicey nice. But 200 years later, you sure could use it to prop up some demoralized troops.
Oh, yeah. So
2 more 100 years and you get to stuff your face.
Yeah. So if you're wanting to tell the tale at your family's Thanksgiving, go for it. It's one that, whether you want to go with the kind of the more conservative sanitized version or the more raw liberal version of the story, it's fine. Neither one is really wrong. The perspective is different, though.
Yeah.
The more sanitized, more conservative story is more looking at a snapshot of a moment.
3 days.
3 days out of one fall. While the more raw and, you could say, negative liberal version of the story is looking at the big picture of genocide.
Yep. Fun.
Yep.
I wonder if Kylie's going to be one of those kids at school. Actually, Dad says that this was brought to you by genocide. Ding.
Yeah, and yeah. All right, and by now I'm sure you've all seen the crazy news about Twitter.
Yeah, bunch of twats.
With Elon Musk taking over and all of that. And
one twat.
Most likely by now, I'm sure most of you have heard about Mastodon.
Well, maybe not. It's not actually that much in the news. It's in your circle because you follow it, but yes. I have not seen a single mention of Mastodon in mainstream.
It's made the front page of CNN and a bunch of other news sites. So
it's there. Yeah. So I'm just saying.
So if you're interested in this, Mastodon was created in 2017 by a German grad student who was tired of all the fascists on
Smell the idealism.
So the goal was to create a safer place online that was decentralized with no ads and no profit motives. So it's just this free, decentralized community where there are different servers, but they are all federated because they are all part of the Fediverse. So to do a quick explainer on these terms. So Mastodon started in 2017. By 2018, the ActivityPub standard was getting completed. It's now a W3C standard, which W3C, that is the World Wide Web Consortium that is the group for doing open web standards.
Okay.
And ActivityPub is a standard.
I saw the confusion on my face.
Yeah.
Like you're jargoning.
So the Fediverse uses ActivityPub, which is a standard for the basic idea being RSS feeds, which podcasts use, blogs use, where the main thing with an RSS feed is who wrote it and what did they write. And the idea with ActivityPub was get a whole bunch of more information so you can actually do commenting and discussion and all that kind of stuff. And so that has got formalized. Mastodon, Plurima, PeerTube, PixelFed, and a bunch of other services out there have all adopted ActivityPub. And that allows for federation. And with federation, from any of these services, you can follow somebody on anything else that's using ActivityPub, and it just works. Because it's all using this open standard that's kind of like email. My name, my full username to find on Mastodon is htotw@mastodon.social.
No, okay.
Don't just type that in because that would sound more like an email address. So it's technically at hotw@mastodon.social. But on any other Mastodon server or anything else on the Fediverse, you can follow that because part of the username includes the home server. So when you pull it up in whichever one you're on, it knows to ask the server I'm on, hey, anything from this guy?
Okay.
And it results in a fascinating world where there are a bunch of LGBTQ focused Mastodon communities.
Well, from my understanding, there's a bunch of communities for just about everything.
Yeah. There are vegan communities. Those are the main ones I've heard about. A lot of tech communities.
A lot of tech.
Linux and open source related ones.
A lot of geek.
And each community
nerd cultures
has its own rules.
Okay.
So if you join a vegan LGBTQ Mastodon server, and then you start posting pictures of your...
I'm sure there's a taco joke in there somewhere.
And you start posting pictures of your brisket, you're gonna have a bad time. If you join
Just post pictures of your girlfriend eating tacos. That's all we want to see.
A free and open source tech-focused Mastodon instance, and all you talk about is food and travel, no, you're not going to have a good time there. Find the one that fits you. There's a lot that are just general servers. Mastodon.social is the one that's run by the original founder. Don't join that one. It's overloaded. I've been on it for almost a year. So that's why I'm there. I wouldn't have signed up for that server now because there are other servers that can take the load. That one can't.
That's what she said.
But one of the things that's really cool with it is, if you follow some of the news that I do, you know that, and that I've talked about on the show, Gab, the super conservative, horrible messaging platform, that's Mastodon.
Yeah.
Trump's Truth Social is Mastodon.
Well, that's the thing with open source.
Yeah.
It's open. So fascists and everybody can use it.
Fascists
can also ignore it.
Fascists who have gotten kicked off of Twitter for being too fascist for Twitter can join or can use the same software that was created to have like Twitter, but without the fascist system.
Yep.
That's where federation comes in the Fediverse. The Fediverse being the federated universe. Every server can choose whether or not to federate with any other server because there is no central control. If you have an account on Truth Social, I'm pretty sure they don't federate at all. If you have an account on Gab, they do federate, but almost no other server will federate with them.
They're open to it, but nobody's shaking that hand.
So by finding the community that's the right fit for you, that community will likely be filtering out stuff that you wouldn't want to see anyway.
So can you join bunches of communities based on your different interests?
You have a home.
That's confusing to me.
You have a home community. And then from your home server. And on your home server, you've got both what you're subscribed to is one feed, and one feed you can look at is your home servers, your local feed, which is everything on the local server that you're on. And then there's the global feed, which is everything that's on the Fediverse that your home server is federated with. You can follow people and you can follow hashtags. And so if you're on a general server, but you want to follow atheists and you want to follow
the downfall of Twitter.
The downfall of Twitter.
Is that a hashtag? Hashtag downfall. Twitter downfall.
Twitter migration is the main one.
Twitter migration. Oh, that's clean. I like that. Nah, that's not fun.
One of the key things about
how about Twitter Schadenfreude?
But you can follow these, and so even if you're not on a free and open source or LGBTQ server, you can follow people talking about that by following hashtags and then find more people to follow to help build your own community.
My other question about the hashtags is it like how people use hashtags in Twitter and Facebook where everybody makes up their own hashtag and hopes that it starts trending? Or are there like designated hashtags that will actually get you keyed into certain subjects?
They are not designated. Anybody can create a new one. But when you start looking at hashtags, they will tell you how active they are.
Aha. Yes, that's cool. Okay.
So you want to use hashtags where there are active discussions.
Okay, because I hate that. In like Facebook, people do it all the time. They'll make up their own hashtag. And it's like, why did you do that? That's dumb. But yeah, okay, I like that.
So, and I've followed quite a few hashtags. So I see a wide variety of stuff on Mastodon because I've subscribed to or followed a bunch of different hashtags. And that is cool. One of the big things with Mastodon being open source and free and not motivated by profit, most of the servers are open to donations.
Well, somebody's running those.
Because somebody has to pay for the hosting bills.
Yeah. So, yeah.
It's not particularly expensive to run your own instance, and if you want to, you can. But there's lots available. They do need help. There are a few Mastodon servers that require a actual subscription, like financial subscription, to be a member to cover the cost.
Okay.
So that is also something that is
private club.
Yeah.
Fair
Some
enough.
of them. Yeah. If you want to have a little bit more exclusive, tighter knit community, that's one way to do it while still being part of the greater Fediverse.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But one of the things is there is no algorithm driving content. The people are the algorithm. If you want to expand how many people see something, just starring it, the equivalent to liking it, does nothing. You have to boost it, which would be more equivalent to sharing on Facebook or retweeting on Twitter. And by boosting the toot, more people can smell it.
We need the fart sound effect. I don't know where that...
And the toot, because it's Mastodon. So...
what does toot have to do with Mastodon?
Elephants toot through their...
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So a Mastodon would also...
farts. I was getting really confused there. I was on the wrong end of the animal there. Excellent. I love it.
So if you're interested and aren't already there...
I'm going to experiment with this week. I'm bored with Reddit. I'm bored. I try not to use Facebook at all anymore. Once in a while. But it's like, yeah, it'd be fun to try something new.
It's fun.
I got a week to do it.
And don't go on Mastodon and think that you can act like you do on Twitter.
Well,
or Reddit.
I'm a virgin, Twitter virgin. I've never had Twitter. I've never...
right. I'm not saying that to you. It's to the...
No, yeah.
Yeah.
I hear it is a cultural mindset that Twitter people just get it. I'm not a part of that, so I'm not really sure what that is, but I've heard people refer to it, and apparently it's trash. You're trashy people.
On Mastodon, be nice, be kind, be supportive, be helpful, and don't be an asshole. If you're an asshole, don't be surprised when you get kicked off of the server you're on. One of the great things about the portability, one of the great things about the Open Federation is if you find you don't fit in the server you're in, like you accidentally signed up for a vegan Mastodon instance and you're obsessed with Texas barbecue.
And you decided to go carnivore 3 weeks later?
You can move.
Okay.
You just go and you create a new account on a new instance, and then you go to your old instance and you set up the forwarding to your new instance. I have done that already. My first Mastodon account was on podcastindex.social, and I moved it to mastodon.social. I wanted to go less specific, and I will probably move my home server again.
Okay.
So check it out. Have fun. Don't use mastodon.social. Go to...
Yeah, give the guy a break. He's been working, what did you say, 14-hour days?
14 hours a day since Elon Musk took over Twitter. Check out joinmastodon.org, where you can find servers that want you.
Okay, that sounds awesome.
And find the one that you want to be a part of. And then follow me at HTOTW, at HTOTW at mastodon.social, where I am verified.
That word's been so tainted.
Because the actual, like, if you see in somebody's display name on Mastodon, the blue check mark, that's just something they copied and pasted into it. That's not real. If you look at somebody's profile, you can see their websites that they list. And if there's a check mark on that, that means it's verified because they actually put a link back saying that that's their site.
They cited their source.
And I did that. I have embedded into the htotw.com website a reference back to my Mastodon account saying, this is me.
Cool.
So
you're such a nerd.
So yeah, check it out. Before we go, we have feedback from...
Sorry, that was loud.
We have feedback from...
Have a sleeping child, for the love of God.
From Kristener Blasphemer via Patreon.
One of our faves.
In my environmental science class in college, the AMOC current scared me the most. Ocean life depends on a balance of salt water, and desalination, I personally fear, will impact our food chain. What are your thoughts?
It has impacted our food chain already. That's a fact.
Everything we are doing is impacting our food chain.
It's making it worse.
And climate change will absolutely impact our food chain.
Yep. It's so funny because we're working so hard in the Pacific Northwest to save the salmon. It's like, the salmon are fucked, dude. But, I mean, we gotta try.
Now...
Jesus Christ, we're so screwed.
Right now, we need to be doing everything we can to support every possible food chain.
Yeah, just throw yourself into the ocean, get eaten by orcas.
Saving the salmon right now could be critical.
Yeah. They're planning on breaching 4 dams on the Klamath River on the Oregon-California border to save salmon, which is awesome.
And a particular suckerfish.
That's awesome, too. There's never love for the suckers.
There have been federal lawsuits, over those suckerfish in the Klamath River.
For them.
But the...
Way to hang in there. Womp womp.
But saving the salmon would help. Yeah, the AMOC will probably really screw with the North Atlantic fisheries. We could easily be looking at a second or third cod war over that.
Not to mention all the illegal fishing that is being discovered and verified through like satellite imaging and stuff.
Yeah. But like The Cod War of the, what was it, 70s or 80s between Iceland and Britain.
Sorry, it sounds so stupid. It's like an emu war, but I mean, legit. It
was cute. The AMOC could result in a Cod War that is deadly. The Pacific fisheries are equally,
because even if you don't eat fish, you depend on fish.
For
everything else. So yeah, it's gonna be big.
And as far as climate change and its impact on the food chain, the vast majority of our vegetables in the United States are grown in California.
They're on fire.
Specifically in the Central Valley of California, which is turning into a desert.
Yeah.
Those vegetables will have to move. The amount of agriculture that is being dedicated to the production of fuel crops and industrial seed oils is problematic and shouldn't be expanding. We should be expanding the amount of highly nutritious foods we're growing in areas that can handle it.
How's farming in Alberta? That seems like the natural thing is like, obviously the United States is parts of it is becoming a desert. Let's just move it north to Canada.
That will happen.
Where they have large swaths of land that is either desert or ice, depending on the time of year. Well, let's figure it out.
So my biggest concern with food chain right now is that efforts will be made in the name of the environment to modify the food chain in a way that will cause famine. And that
intentions and all that.
And that could be in the form of eliminating beef and then reaching the point where, okay, no farmland's arable and we don't have anything left that we can eat that can handle all the land we can't farm anymore. That would be bad. Efforts to convert wheat fields into vegetable fields. We've seen what Ukraine's wheat harvests not making it to out of the ports, how that is impacting the Horn of Africa and the Middle East. We are on the verge of famine in many, many, many parts of the world right now. That won't get better. We need to keep options open, and we need to be really, really smart and really cautious and really careful with changes. And food is one of those where I am the most concerned about radical overcorrection being deadly, very deadly. It's also an area where if we do nothing, we're also fucked.
Right.
Because
I have this whole thing about environmental preservation and protection, where, of course, I've been a diehard environmentalist my entire life, but there's a part of me is like, are we wasting our energies and time trying to preserve and protect stuff that won't survive in 20 years because we've already got the ball moving on climate change? So it's not so much protection and preservation, it's more like environmental adaptation.
Yeah.
And that's not something I've seen anybody else talk about, so I'm not even sure if that's a thing. It just feels like when the goalpost is moving, trying to preserve something isn't going to work, because then you're just shortchanging everybody in the future. But I'm just a dumb, normie person who doesn't have a degree in environmental sciences and can't think forward more than 5 minutes, much less 5 years or 10 years or 50 years. So I'll leave it up to everybody else to figure out.
The biggest thing is
more of a mindset.
The changes need to be slow, and they need to not be
deliberate. They need to be
slow. They need to be deliberate, and they need to not be controlled by corporations that are trying to get a short-term profit,
or whoever is in political power at the moment.
I would even trust that over the corporations that are trying to get a short-term profit.
Oh yeah, when you are literally functioning quarter to quarter, you cannot be trusted with the future of all mankind.
Yeah.
No, that has never worked and never will work for us. Ugh.
Like,
even if it's just saying that out loud is like, holy shit, we're fucked.
Like even just in Idaho over the last 20 years, significant portions of Idaho's farmland have all been completely and fundamentally changed, from growing wheat and general crops to canola.
Yeah.
Just canola.
Yep.
You drive through the Palouse.
Good old
all you see
seed.
is
it's pretty.
Seed. We cannot live on canola alone.
No. In fact, there's a lot of doubts about whether or not we should be even touching that stuff.
It's cheap.
But then again, Idaho is the land of monoculture. Go to the other part of the state and it's all potatoes.
Where we're at, it's a huge amount of it's onions and sweet potatoes.
Fuck tons of onions.
Or not sweet potatoes, sugar beets. Yeah.
Yeah. That is unfortunately how farms work these days.
So, yes. Are we worried? Yep.
Are we just going to do what we can to survive? Yep.
Yeah.
This is really kind of out of our hands. But at least we can talk about it.
Yeah. So, if you want to contact us, you can find the feedback form at htotw.com/contact. You can send us an email at contact@htotw.com. Leave us a voice message at 208-996-8667. Or use the SpeakPipe button on the website. You can support the show on a monthly basis with Patreon or just once with PayPal, credit, debit, Apple Pay, or Google Pay. And you can find the links at htotw.com/donate.
You can fucking mail us change. We don't care. We love you anyway.
And until next time, happy Thanksgiving. And remember, not all those who wander are lost.